Hi pre-algebra students, now we're on section 4.5, adding and subtracting unlike fractions. So in section 4.4 we learned how to add like fractions. Remember, you can only add two fractions that have common denominators called like fractions. So in this section our goal is to add things like 2/3 plus 1/4, two unlike fractions. And to do that we need to use what we've learned in the previous section. So in order to add these fractions, you can't add them the way they're written. You must have a common denominator. So the first thing you need to do is find the least common denominator of the fractions. In this case, 3 and 4 both go into 12. So 12 is going to be our common denominator. Okay, if we can rewrite both of these fractions with denominators of 12, they will be like fractions, so we can add them together, just like we did in the last section. Now we need to rewrite each of these fractions with their common denominator. This is what we did in the second half of section 4.4. Okay, our denominator here was 3. We need to change that to 12. Okay, so to do that, to go from 3 to 12, we would need to multiply by 4. Okay? If we multiply the denominator by 4, we need to multiply the numerator by the same amount, by 4. And if you remember last section, we kind of wrote this like this. Multiply by 4, so multiply by 4. So you get 8 over 12. So the 8 would go here. 8/12 is the same thing as 2/3, it's just not simplified. Okay, same process here. To go from 4 to 12, we need to multiply the denominator by 3. So multiply the numerator by 3 also, and we get 3/12. 3/12 is the same thing as 1/4. It's just not simplified. Okay, now we can add them together because we have like fractions. Remember, to add fractions, they have to have a common denominator. We don't add their denominator. We just add the numerators. 8 plus 3 would give us 11 over 12. So 2/3 plus 1/4, or a fourth, adds up to 11 over 12. So that's the steps that are listed here. Find the least common denominator, rewrite each fraction with the least common denominator, then you can add and subtract the like fractions. Remember, you add and subtract their numerators, keep your common denominator, and write it in simplest form, which means if you could reduce this, you would. Okay, so that's the whole process, or most of this section, is doing these steps. So let's look at some more examples. 2/5 plus 8/15. Your first question should be, what is the least common denominator? Well, 5 and 15 both go into 15. Now rewrite them, both with the common denominator of 15. So 2/5, you need to multiply the denominator by 3, and the numerator by 3 is the same thing as 6/15. Okay, we already have 8/15, so we do not have to change 8/15. So in for 2/5, we change that to 6/15. 6/15 plus 8/15 are 14/15. Okay, and you cannot simplify it. Again, that's number 1 on your handout here, so make sure you're following along on the handout. Okay, 2/3 plus 1/8. Your first question should be, can I add these together? No, they're not common. They don't have a common denominator. They're not like fractions. Okay, so get your common denominator. What do 8 and 3 both go into? Well, they both go into maybe 48, but they also both go into 24. The smallest one is the best one. Okay, so you need to switch both of them to over 24. So to go from 2/3, to get a common denominator of 24, you have to multiply the denominator and the numerator by 8. So that would be 16 over 24. For 1/8, you'd have to multiply them both by 3. So that would be 3 over 24. Add their numerators, you would get 19 over 24, which is in simplest form. Okay, why don't you try to do letter C on your handout? Okay, 3/4 plus 1/6. Letter D has variables involved. 2x over 15 plus 3x over 10. Again, the least common denominator would be 30. It's the smallest thing that 15 and 10 go into. If you're having trouble finding that, remember you can write out the factors or the multiples of 15. 15 times 1 is 15. 15 times 2 is 30. 10 goes into 30. Rewrite both of them over 30. So multiply by 2, you would get 30. Multiply by 2, you would get 4x. Multiply by 3 to get 30. So multiply the numerator by 3, you would get 9x. Now you can add the numerators together. 4x plus 9x is 13x over 30, which is in simplest form. Okay, so the first four we've done, or first three we've done together, and the one you've done by yourself, have all been addition. What about subtraction problems? 2/3 minus 10 over 11. Same idea, find your common denominator, 33. Rewrite both of the fractions over 33. So multiply by 11, and you get 22 over 33. That's the same thing as 2/3, just not simplified. Okay, change 10 over 11 to get your common denominator of 33. Multiply by 3 to get 30 over 33. Okay, now we can subtract them. 22 over 33 minus 30 over 33. Now be careful because 22 minus 30 is going to give you a negative number. So it's a good idea to switch it to 22 plus negative 30, which is negative 8 over 33, which remember you can write as negative 8 33rds or negative 8 over 33. Okay, how about 5/8 minus 1/3 minus 1/12? Now we have three things, so it's getting harder to find the least common denominator. What I would do is I'd think about the 12. Does 3 go into 12? Yes. Does 8 go into 12? No. So 12 times 2 is 24. Does 3 go into 24? Yes. Does 8 go into 24? Yes. So 24 is my least common denominator. Write them all over 24. So to write the first one over 24, you'd multiply by 3. You'd get 15 over 24. To get the second one over 24, you'd multiply by 8. So you get 8 over 24. And the last one you multiply by 2 to get 2 over 24. Now we can subtract. 15 minus 8 is 7. Minus 2 is 5/24. Okay, so same process every time. Find the least common denominator, rewrite the fractions with the least common denominator, and then add or subtract and keep the common denominator. Okay, it does get a little bit, so why don't you try letter G on your handout? So far you had to try letter C and letter G. Letter G says negative 3/4 minus 1/14 minus 6 over 7. What about when you have letters? 5 over x plus 1 over 6. So again, your least common denominator here, if you remember what we did last section, you just multiply the 6 times the x, because they're different things, and you get 6x. So to write the first one over 6x, you need to multiply by 6. If you multiply the denominator by 6, you need to multiply the 5 by 6 to get 30. To go from 6 to 6 over x, you need to multiply by x. So you get 1x over 6x. Now we have our common denominator, so that stays as 6x. We add the numerators, 30 plus x. Remember, you can't add unlike terms, so you just leave it as 30 plus x over 6x. Okay, that's a little tougher one, so if you need help with that, please ask me in class. And one more of these. Subtract 5 minus y over 4. Remember, if it's just 5, it's 5 over 1. Okay? So the LCD of 5 over 1 in 4 is 4. Okay? So the first one you need to multiply by 4, and you'd get 20 over 4, which is the same thing as 5, minus y over 4. Now we can subtract them because we have a common denominator of 4. Okay, so you get 20 minus y, which you can't do, so you leave it as 20 minus y all over 4. And again, those get a little bit more confusing when you have the variables involved. Alright, the last part of this section is how to compare fractions. And to compare fractions, remember we use either greater than or less than. Remember, less than looks like an L. So what's bigger, 3/8 or 14 over 40? Okay, so that's A on your handout. To compare fractions, you need to compare them by getting a common denominator. Okay, so the common denominator between 8 and 40 is 40. So if you rewrite 3/8 over 40, you'd have to multiply them both by 5, and you'd get 15 over 40. Now you can compare them. What's larger, 15/40 or 14/40? Well, 15/40 is 1 larger. So the answer is 3/8 is larger than 14/40. Now it's going to be tempting to leave it like this, but remember you have to answer the original question. 3/8 is greater than 14/40. Let's do another one. -2/7 or -1/3. Okay, I'm not sure which is larger. To compare them, we have to get a common denominator. Common denominator is 21. So rewrite the first one over 21. You would get -6 over 21 because multiply them both by 3. The second one, you have to multiply them both by 7. So you'd get -7 over 21. So what's larger, -6 over 21 or -7 over 21? Well, what's larger, -6 or -7? -6, if you think about temperature, is 1 above -7. So -2/7 is larger than -1/3. All right, why don't you try to do letter C on your own? What's larger, -2/5 or -5/12? Okay, you'll also see a couple examples of what you'll have on your homework with some story problems. A freight truck has 1/4 ton of computers, 1/3 ton of televisions, and 3/8 of a ton of small appliances. Find the total weight. To find the total, remember, that means add them together. So we'd have to add those 3 fractions together. To add, remember, we have to have a common denominator, which would be 24. So the first one you multiply by 6. The second one you multiply by 8, and the third one you multiply by 3. 3 times 3 would give you 9. Now you can add them together, and it'd be 23/24 of a ton. Okay, so why don't you try letter number 4 on your handout. A flight from Appleton, Chicago takes 7/12 of an hour. If the plane has been flying for 1/4 of an hour, how much time is left before landing? So try that one. So you have 4 problems to do for class for section 4.5. All right, so we'll see you in class. Let me know if you have any questions on these, and you can start your homework if you want.